Hey, we're live. It's Friday on Live VoteVets. I am Fred Wellman, former Army officer here, host of Online VoteVets. We're so glad as everybody gathers and comes in. People already jump in up on the screen. We really appreciate seeing you. There is a lot going on in the world right now. It is a crazy time. I've got my speaker going off my ear. That was great. As always, I always forget to turn off our YouTube channel and then I go on the air. So that's what you guys see me freak out in the first 30 seconds of every show. It has been a crazy week, as you know. I don't even know where to start, but if you look at the name of the show this week, called "The Walls Are Crumbling," and the reason is you're really starting to see a little bit of pushback and some griping, and you're starting to see some of the generals speak out about the many policies and the inadvertent and dumb ideas that are coming out of the headshed. And we're going to examine a few of those up front. We've got an incredible guest, incredible story to talk about why he's doing what he's doing. You're going to love hearing from Ambassador Tim Roemer. This is a great time to talk. On top of all that, it's been an interesting week as far as all the different things we talked to you since last week, right? We talked about earlier in the week, we talked about this military parade that Trump wants to have for his 79th birthday, for God's sake. That's going to be June 16th or wherever, somewhere. All these crazy things that are going on. And I tell you what, we have a lot of news jump in, but there's some good news too, right? And some of that good news is for concerns some of the work that we do. If you remember last week, we had Janessa Goldbeck on the show. Janessa runs the Vet Voice Foundation, our sister organization. They've been working on a number of things. So if you don't understand what Vet Voice does, they are involved in things that make the country better. For example, the SAVES Act, which did pass the House yesterday, and we have been fighting that tooth and nail because it's going to disenfranchise a lot of military members, a lot. And so we wanted to get that. That's gone through the House, so now the battle shifts to the Senate. But in Colorado, we have a wonderful guy named Harris that works for us out there in Colorado. And this week, the Colorado governor signed a law requiring that gun safety training goes before firearm sales. So this applies, and what this applies to is any weapon, I'll have to read it so I don't get it wrong, any weapon, so safety training course to be eligible to buy or sell semi-automatic rifles, shotguns, or handguns with detachable magazines. Now, why is this a big deal? Well, it's funny. Why are veterans involved in this? Well, the reason is, look, the fact is, folks, when you join the military, anybody who's a veteran in our group, in our community, which is growing fast, or knows someone, they don't just hand you a weapon on day one, say, hey, here's your weapon, have a nice day. No, you go through extensive training. You do dry training with no bullets involved. You go to a simulator sometimes. All these things before they ever hand you a weapon, a deadly weapon that can kill with bullets attached to it. And all we've been saying, a lot of us who talk about guns, well, look, no, Second Amendment's a part of the Constitution. Nobody's trying to get rid of that. Nobody wants to get rid of your guns. But what we do like to see is some common sense safety things. And this is one. Several groups are involved in this bill. Our friends at Mom Demand Action. But of course, the Vet Voice Foundation was part of it. And Harrison explained, he says there's a big contingent of veterans that serve, that know these weapons and want folks to be able to make common sense laws without being shouted down by people saying, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, we do know what we're talking about, right? And that's why Vet Voice is involved in this. They've had horrible mass shootings in Colorado. Who can forget the Aurora shooting and others? And the original Columbine. So all those are reasons that Colorado's taken the lead to try and at least get some common sense gun safety training in place before people can buy weapons. So exciting. Congratulations to our friend at the Vet Voice Foundation. They fought for this long and hard. Thank you for Governor Polis for signing that. Now, shifting over to our main talk, right? The military. So this week, we're finally starting to see some cracks, right? And this came in the form, in a number of forms. And I'll show you a number of them here. This one's a big one. There's to the Pentagon now, who believe that we should actually be withdrawing from Europe. They already actually did pull our troops out of a Polish base that was by the Ukrainian border, where we supplied our Ukrainian allies. So there is talk in the Trump administration. Of course, he's always hated NATO, right? Well, it's getting pushback from, well, the right place. The top commander in Europe, the general over there, Command General, when he testified this week to the House Armed Services Committee, pushed back, and he wasn't alone. Republicans also jumped in. Republican leaders of the House Armed Services Committee and the Senate Armed Services Committee are demanding answers from the administration about the idea of pulling troops out of Europe, where we are forward positioned to against our foes in Russia and elsewhere. On top of that, South Korea. There's talk of pulling out of South Korea, where North Korean troops still hover over the border. The commanding general there said that would be, quote, problematic. Okay, it's not that we have huge contingencies. So there are real questions that a lot of people are asking. Where are we going to? How are we saving money by abandoning our allies? And so you're starting to see those first pushbacks from the professionals within the armed forces. If history's any guide, they'll probably lose their jobs. We'll see. But right now, the four-star generals that command our troops in these regions and our experts in those regions are pushing back, saying it's not a time to be pulling back forces, as the world is much more unstable than it's ever been. The war in Ukraine rages. China still threatens its neighbors, and of course Taiwan. This is not the time for us to walk away. North Korea is still led by Kim Jong-un, who's still as nuts as he always was. So it's not a time for us to withdraw from the world when the threats are building instead of getting smaller. That's what these generals are saying, and that's the first time we've finally seen some true pushback within the ranks. But then you're seeing some other ones, some strange places. Show some of those, JJ. This was an interesting story. So we covered this extensively, where JD Vance went to Greenland and very much attacked our allies in Denmark and others. Keep in mind that last base that we have in Greenland is a joint base between Greenland, Denmark, and the United States. And it put the commanding officer there in a very uncomfortable position. And she made a conscious decision. After JD Vance left over the weekend, she sent an email out to all the folks based at the base saying, I know what you heard. We stand together. Our flags fly together. We are still allies and partners, and nothing changes that. Story came out, this story at military.com, didn't take 24 hours for her to be fired. So that's how it goes when you stand up against this administration. You could argue whether it's appropriate for her to wade into the political arguments, but when you're commanding an international and joint base, and a visitor comes over and basically smears your allies to keep the place running, keep in mind, of the 600 plus people at that base, only 150 of them are Americans. And then they're smeared, and the people who are our hosts are smeared. This commander, she made a brave decision to stand up, and of course she was fired for it. But I think she can hang her hat proudly knowing she was fired for the right reason. But there's more. This is an interesting one, and we actually talked about this early on. If you remember about a month and a half ago, when Pete Hegseth first took over as the Secretary of Defense, he headed over to Europe, right? And when he arrived, he got heckled in Europe. It was his very first overseas trip. And when his wife went to go visit the high school there was a walkout because they had to take down all the things that mentioned Black History Month for February and anything that was deemed DEI. Well, that hasn't stopped. Students at government schools, the DODEA is the Department of Defense Education Agency. They handle all the overseas schools, some 150 or more schools around the world, Korea, Germany, Panama, wherever we happen to have troops stationed, that's where these guys are. To include Hawaii, we have schools all over the country, all over the world. The kids are walking out. They've had enough of this ridiculous DEI attacks and the attacks on their education by the government. If you look at it, a lot of the things we faced at local school boards are now being implemented, and they were defeated. Just right now, we had the elections here in Missouri. Here in the St. Louis area where I live, all of the Moms for Liberty people were swept off the boards. There's no more of these far-right book banners left on the school boards in St. Louis, Missouri region. But over at DOD, at the highest levels of our federal government, they are banning books. They're removing books from these kids' schools and hurting their education abilities. These kids have no choice. They have to go to these schools. There's no private school for a kid. That's certainly not one that a military member could afford for their kids. So when the schools are banning books and stuff, these kids are left with little redress. But they're stepping out. So leave it to the kids to kind of step in when the adults aren't doing their jobs. And then in addition stories, this is the one we want to talk about before we get to our guest. So, and it's laughable. It's so ridiculous. Okay. So for anyone who saw the story, if you dive into the story. So this week, Hegseth proudly signed a memo that they're going to evaluate all the civilian positions in the Department of Defense. Now, if you know DOD, and our guest can talk about it too, most of the DOD is civilian. It is the largest cabinet agency of the United States government. While we do have 1 million to 2 million service members in uniform, the people that run that joint are mostly civilians, right? So they're going to actually evaluate, this is in the memo, they're going to evaluate each civilian position in the United States Department of Defense for its lethality, its contribution to lethality. Okay. I'm not making this up. So you're going to have to be, if you're a civilian who's running the gym, or you're a civilian running the water plant, okay, or the garbage system on a military base like Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where I spent a third of my career, they're going to actually have to write memos that justify each position's contribution to lethality. Like picking up the garbage makes us more lethal. Okay. Having basketballs makes us more lethal. Everything's lethal, lethal. It is the most ridiculous thing I've ever effing heard, you guys. That's everything has to be lethal. When you know what? These people are running small cities. Fort Campbell, Kentucky is 20,000 people. Okay. All right. When you talk about overseas bases, these are American cities overseas. Not everything's about killing shit. Okay. Sometimes you just need the shit to go down the drain. Okay. So they're going to have to justify, again, the plumbers for their lethality or the heating unit people for their lethality. And the lines go on and on and on because it's all so very stupid. But this obsession with lethality has gotten everywhere and it's affecting everything. I think that's our last story, JJ, isn't it? One more maybe. And that's why we want to. Oh my God! And this actually ties into it too. Thanks, JJ, because JJ's Air Force. Okay, this is another example. We're talking about this obsession with lethality. So for anybody who served in the military, you know that traditionally, when there's a 3-day holiday weekend, and anybody and all of our veterans in the chat, I know I can see you here. You know that when you've served, that usually almost every 3-day weekend ends up being a 4-day weekend in the military. And why do we do that? So guys can have time. So here's my theory. I'm a retired lieutenant colonel. In my view, I served during the global war on terror. When we deploy for 6 months or a year, when you're overseas from your family in Korea or, short tour somewhere else, you know what you don't get? You don't get family time. So it's not an hourly job. Being in the military isn't a job where you have to serve 8 hours a day, then you go home. Sometimes you serve 24 hours straight. Many weekends you work because that's just the way it is. You got to man the post. If you're in a flying job, you're flying all over the country. So it was just common sense for as long. And look, I was in the military started in 1983, y'all. I'm old as dirt. I'm proud of it. Okay. But I'm telling you right now, as all those years ago, a 3-day weekend became a 4-day weekend. And then frankly, we kind of got off at about 2:00 on Thursday so you can have family time. The Air Force actually felt compelled to issue a memo canceling all of those extra days off because it doesn't contribute to lethality, right? Having time off your family makes you less lethal, you guys. That's the idiocy of the Hegseth Department of Defense. The idea that giving service members more time with their families undermines their ability to kill the enemy. And I would argue, as a retired officer of the United States military trained at our highest academy, that's horse crap, okay? Giving our soldiers time to be with their families, time to enjoy the little time off they get because they're working so hard isn't bad for us. It's good for us. But the Pete Hegseth worldview, time off with the families makes you weak. So we're not going to do that anymore. We're not lethal enough. And that's where we're at. It's a great place to go to our guest. And now our guest, you guys, I can't believe we got him on the show here at VoteVets. We're thrilled. I'm lucky to know some cool folks. But Ambassador Tim Roemer is a former United States Congressman, former ambassador to India, member of the Board of Visitors, advisory committees. I don't know how many you're on, sir. Let's bring him on the show.
Hey, Fred. Great to be here.
It's great to see you, sir. Tell everybody a little bit more about your background. Your bio is like 6 pages. I know you can hit the highlights better than I can.
Don't read the bio.
You got to.
No. Well, my background, a lot like yours and JJ's, your producer. I'm from the Midwest. You're from St. Louis. He's from Illinois. Grew up middle-class family with a bunch of brothers and a sister. My mom and dad set us down when we were 10, 11 years old and said, you're going to go to college and you're going to pay for it. So get your butt to work. And ended up shoveling driveways, mowing lawns, working at the local zoo, shoveling, you know what, Fred, getting ready for my job.
Real thing.
Later on. And, doing all kinds of things, worked my way through college and paid for it. And, I've had very, very good jobs in life, surrounded by smarter people than me that always try to help make me look good and the country look good. I've got a wife of 36 years, 4 kids that I'm really, really proud of. They're good human beings, and a rescue dog from Mississippi named Willie. So, how do you get better than that? I'm lucky.
You guys, folks, you understand, we always have like a pre-show where we hang out, and the goal of the pre-show is to get camera angles right and sound. we spent most of the time talking about dogs this time. So if you're waiting for the show at 12:01 or 1:01, wherever you are, it's because we are talking about our dogs instead of the show. But this is what we do. We're very professional here. Sir, thanks for joining. Now, the reason we connected, obviously, is you just recently left your position on the Board of Visitors at the National Defense University. And you've got some really good reasons. It ties in what we were talking about earlier about what Hegseth's doing to the DoD, what the Trump administration is trying to do, these odd decisions they're making as far as the educational institutions, especially. And as you know, you worked at one of the top. So I guess we'll start at the top there. For those who don't know, a lot of our viewers are civilians and all. What is the National Defense University and how does it play into things?
So great, important question, Fred. Just like our Naval Academy and West Point and Air Force and Merchant Marines, they help teach and bring our young people up educationally to keep the peace, preserve prosperity for people and improve it, and go to war when we have to and when we need to. Right. National Defense University is for that next degree after that, for our higher level military to go back to school and get up to speed on what are the current threats in the world today. For instance, what do you do about Taiwan if China would invade next month? How do you prepare the Taiwanese for that? What kind of weapon systems would we need? What about artificial intelligence and cyber in the future? How do we war game, learning from what Ukraine is teaching us? So, National Defense University helps educate our people for that master's and next degree to get them fighting and thinking in a joint process, not in silos from the different military. And then, Fred, another great thing they do is they bring in people from other countries, Malaysia, Pakistan, India, Germany, and they help teach and expose some of these folks to American higher education and the American democracy. And that is so essential, Fred. You know this better than anybody.
Yep.
A lot of these folks go back and they become the defense minister in their country. And because they came to America and they know us and they've been educated here, they're more likely to be our allies and our friends and help us with U.S. goals in the future.
And that matters too. And what are the ranks of folks that go through the NDU?
Well, they are from all different kinds of agencies and departments, a lot from the Pentagon, and some from State Department, some from our intelligence agencies, NSA, CIA, and others. So you got military and civilian. And then you've got mid to high level people coming in from foreign countries, colonels, lieutenant colonels, majors, and up that get promoted later on. And so it is just a great bunch of people to learn from, to work from, to travel with. And, they're so smart, their smartness comes off into the ether and hopefully affects all of us, makes us a little smarter when we're in the room with them.
Well, that's it. And it's an important learning environment, that next step. You talked about some key ones there for our senior military officers. It is one of the first places they really do have to talk about joint operations. Many of these guys are going to serve, and women are going to serve in the Pentagon, on joint staffs. I mean, this is a very important senior service college for everyone. And you are on the Board of Visitors. And before we get to the meat of it, what exactly does the Board of Visitors do at a place like the NDU?
A board of visitors is a fancy name for a board of directors, just like a board of directors would be for a, small company in South Bend where I grew up. Maybe they're making parts of the Humvee at a local manufacturing plant. AM General, you serve on the board of that, or a not-for-profit. This is for National Defense University. So it's a governing board, and it gives advice and provides oversight to how the institution is performing on a daily basis. And then we try to give, counsel and advice to the degree we can. Where do you want to be in 3 years? Where do you want to be in 5 years? How do you execute on a strategy to get there?
That's fascinating. And you just left. I mean, you sent me your letter. I think it was just 2 weeks ago. You decided you'd had enough. I mean, what drove? I mean, I know obviously your passion. Anybody can see your passion and love for the institution itself. But you decided to leave, sir. What led you to that decision? I mean, it's crazy, but I mean, what was the final straw for you to say, look, I just can't do this anymore?
Well, a straw is a good word for it. In this instance, it's more like, when the straw that broke the camel's back, it was like the eighth brick that broke the camel's back.
Yeah.
Look, Fred, I'm a fighter. I don't like to resign from boards. I
No, I
like
can't imagine.
to stay there and try to prevail and work with the Democrats and the Republicans, the nonpartisan, the independents, the military to to try to talk common sense into people and try to get your strategy accepted and your ideas for National Defense University funded going forward. So resigning from the board is not something I like to do, nor did I want to. I wanted to stay on for several more years. It's a great board. You're serving, our chairman of the board was just a superb leader. The president of NDU, just a visionary person, delightful Admiral Garvin to work with.
Yeah.
Just extraordinary folks. So I did not want to do this. And furthermore, in politics, I'm a conservative Democrat, moderate Democrat. I don't come at, when we have an election like President Trump being fairly and duly elected, I'm not a Democrat first. I'm an American. I want him to succeed. I want him to do well for peace. I want him to be able to get us effectively out of Ukraine. I want him to grow the stock market in our economy and promote the IRAs for my kids. I got 4 kids. I want to do well. I want a successful America, and I would be cheering on the Trump administration to do well. However, Fred, you just have this series of things happening, and you just highlighted a couple of them in your
Yeah.
your intro. You've got this cavalier and sloppy handling of our highest military intelligence going into a war operation against the Houthis. That's just spread out there for anybody to hear and pick up and
Yep.
potentially endanger our troops as they go into battle. There is the situation of drastic cuts, 400 people cut from CISA, which is our cybersecurity and infrastructure agency. That's the agency that protects America from Russian and Chinese and North Korean cyber attacks on our grids, on our electricity, on our water plants, and on our election system.
Yep.
Decimating that agency really endangers our security in our country. I'm worried about the National Defense University budget. This crew, as you just said, Fred, so articulately, if it's not lethality, it's not funded. And
Right.
we got to fund education in our country. We have to
Right.
fund soft power in our country. We have to fund being smarter and being able to form alliance with our partners around the world and do
Yep.
that better than China does. That's what National Defense University does. If they get decimated across their budget, we lose the battle for the hearts and minds and the prosperity and the peace of our partners around the world.
And we'll actually lose battles. I mean, this isn't just. I mean, it is important for us to have these professional education environments so we can share information and learn. I was fortunate as a young officer. I went to the Armor Advanced course at Fort Knox at the time, and I learned a lot. I was a scout helicopter pilot. It's like, well, knowing how those ground operators work was key to my development as a leader. I went to Ranger School as a pilot. Why? Because I wanted to understand how the infantry was working, so that when I rolled in hot with my Apaches, I was in the right place, right? At the NDU level, I need to understand the Navy's operating features. So when I'm an Army commander, ensure that I can operate with the Navy. And I mean, those are lethal lessons buried amongst philosophy, right? I mean, right. So we are kind of fighting a battle. You do know, I mean, you do feel very strongly that NDU and these other educational organizations are in the crosshairs, aren't they?
Yeah, they are, Fred, sadly. And, NDU has to do a lot to keep our uh, people educated and prepared for the wars and the peace of the future. China has changed dramatically in the last 10 years. Their threat to Taiwan, their growing demographics, their economy, their weapon systems, their Navy has grown. We have to keep our military up to speed on what's going on in Ukraine. What valuable and invaluable lessons for our military to learn there. Now we have drones that you can fly by hand that go up in the air and pick up information on, troops that are stationed miles away. And then some of these drones can lethally fire weapons as well
Yep.
as spy. How do we bring those down? How do we develop the most efficient and inexpensive drones? What are the Russians doing? What have they learned over the last 8 months in terms of
Yeah.
their battlefield technology and strategies? There is so much to teach our military and keep up to speed, and you can just use these lessons learned time and time again. And then, the Trump administration goes to they fire General C.Q. Brown, who was doing
Yep.
a superb job as our Joint
Yep.
Chiefs of Staff. They bring in, who is the guy who was just confirmed. I don't know too much about General Dan Crane. I'm sure he is a very decent man. I'm sure as a 3-star, he's had some great experiences. But you know better than anybody, Fred, that job of Joint Chiefs is for a 4-star. It's not for retired. It's for
Nope.
active duty. And it's
Yep.
for people that have had strategic commands to go in
Yep.
the second most important job in our military, other than the Secretary of Defense. And
Yep.
they
And
put
he
somebody in that needs all kinds of waivers to even
right.
be considered for the job.
And it almost seems like they did it because of a fake memory, apparently, that Trump has of him kissing his butt. I mean,
Or
that's
wearing a
the
hat.
that's the most that's the part that during his I had a lot of people ask me today because a number of our Democratic colleagues or Democratic colleagues did vote for him, and I had a number of people like aghast, but I think they missed the part where he said I don't know where that story came from. It wasn't me. I would like to believe he's telling the truth. I hope if he's telling the truth, then yeah, he was selected basically out of retirement because of a false memory, which is hard to wrap your head around. And I can see where it'd be very hard to continue to participate in an organization like NDU on the board of visitors, essentially representing the government and that government in a lot of ways. I mean, you're forced in a position where you kind of have to look at the government views and possibly go along with them and the changes. It's got to be shocking. And then of course you and I talked about when we last talked last week that the Middle East isn't, we've been fighting for 3 weeks allegedly in Yemen, and they haven't put out any information whatsoever on that. Essentially, sending our kids to war, aren't they?
Well, let's start with your great story that you introduced, Fred, on the potential or possibility of troop withdrawal of U.S. troops out of Eastern Europe. Now,
Yeah.
President Biden put those troops in to defend NATO and to be a force of restraint on the Russians in Ukraine. Now,
Yeah.
President Trump has said, I'll get us out of Ukraine in 24 hours. That hadn't happened yet. I hope we can do it. But so
Yeah.
far, Fred, I think the Russians are running circles around the Trump advisors and negotiators. Each day, they delay the ceasefire, they move the
Yep.
goalposts, they change the territorial issues, they claim they want more land, not less land. And the Americans look at the Trump administration is now talking about giving the Russians economic incentives and removing the sanctions even before you get to negotiating some kind of peace that will
Right.
be respected and upheld by both the Ukrainians and the Russians. So we need those troops there. You don't withdraw the
Yeah.
troops until you get concessions from the Russians. That would be a point that you could negotiate with the Russians on. So leave the troops there. And, in the Middle East, Brad, for the president of the United States to talk about kicking out all the Palestinians and having them leave. I remember, we studied this terrorism issue very, very closely on the 9/11 Commission, a bipartisan commission, 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans working together. And we saw where Al Qaeda was growing and proliferating. And when somebody says we're going to kick out all the Palestinians from their religious homeland, that would be like telling us Catholics, you're going to be kicked out of Ireland and Rome. You're no longer there. That lines up terrorism for the Americans to face, from Al Qaeda for a long, long time. When you use that kind of language to say
Oh,
America is going to take Gaza over, build condos, and make it the Riviera, of the Middle East. What kind of money would taxpayers have to put in to do that? 50,
Yeah.
$100 billion to do that? Our
Yeah.
troops would have to go there. That is not going to happen, Fred.
Well, it goes to strategy too, sir. And we didn't even mention that you remember the 9/11 Commission, which is, and thank you for that, because that was incredible service at a very politically charged time. But one thing we used to say in Iraq, I worked for General David Petraeus, both in the 101st Airborne and as a spokesman later in my career. And one thing we used to say, and you know this, sir, from your own experience as an ambassador, is like we used to say, when I kill one terrorist, I create three more, right? When I kill one insert, because our actions have consequences. And like you said, saying we're going to take over Gaza, that it's ours, that we have a right to it, be it sovereign or not, saying we're going to move these people from their homeland, all we're doing is creating even more of the radicals we allegedly are fighting. I mean, and these people think that we could just kill them all. We just kill our way out of and that's another thing that Petraeus used to say regularly was it actually made its way into our manual on counterinsurgency. Is like, you're never going to kill your way out of an insurgency. You just can't, because you just keep creating more. And it goes to that, what you were frustrated with, sir. And that's kind of stuff we teach at NDU. Lethality can be feeding people, getting them clinics, getting them healthcare, settling their lives so they don't turn to terrorism. They don't turn to lack of hope, because we know, right, insurgencies are driven by lack of hope often. And so
Great
in many
point,
ways
Fred. That's
so
such an important point. I remember General Jim Mattis talking about this in
yeah.
testimony before, I think it was the
A
Senate.
very lethal guy, by the way, right?
Very, very.
No question. Jim Mattis he was never shy about blowing stuff up.
Now, and here he is with his reputation and background, tough, respected, bipartisan, credentials, good leader. I think he's, respected on both sides of the aisle. And he is answering a question about gutting the State Department. And this was even before they completely eliminated USAID. And he said, look, if you gut the State Department, you're going to save some money, sure, but you're not going to save any money from war. And so just move that money from the ledger in the State Department over to my department, because I'm going to need that money to then fight the people that are created by I can do kinetic, but you have to do soft power too. You have to have both at the same time.
Yep. And that's been the horrifying part of USAID being USAID was the guys that built the wells we got credit for. It was horrifying to understand. And it's nerve-wracking to me, again, circling back to our point that National Defense University, this is where we learned those things. I mean, that those schoolhouses that I went to, where I learned the counterinsurgency, where I learned that no, it isn't about always just blowing things up. You can certainly threaten to blow things up, but more often than not, you have to build things too, to build a relationship with those who are trying to be saved. And of course, I'm sure you were frustrated by the pullback of, I mean, they fired all the JAGs. Their intent is to, you did study 9/11, you were an ambassador, unleashing us to just kill anyone in combat without rules of war, without rules of engagement, is a terrifying thought for those who serve as well. I mean, I can't imagine being an ambassador and having to explain how people are getting killed in your watch, can you?
No, and it's such an honor to serve your country as an ambassador to a country like India with 1.4 billion people. You
Wow.
go everywhere in a car, and that car, Fred, has the American flag on it, right?
Yeah.
Everywhere you go, front, left, hood near the bumper is that American flag flying, tall and proud. And you go into villages to help them recover from a tsunami or an earthquake. You go to hand out diplomas at a Muslim high school where no Chinese or Russian ambassador has ever been. You go to different places where, you're talking about American values that coincide with the democratic values of the people of India, with their republic and their democracy. And so those kinds of things where you're aligning your values together as two different peoples go a long way toward cooperation, trade, India buying C-17s that are manufactured in the United States of America with American jobs, and we export those things to India for their security. They decide to buy our product, not the Russian product, not the European product, ours, because it's the best life cycle product they can invest in, the best technology in the world, and it creates good blue collar jobs at home here. So that diplomacy that ambassadors often do and that our soft power does not only helps our military relationships, it helps our military sales, and it helps our jobs back home in America. That we have to have. I come from the Midwest like you do. We've seen the devastation in the Midwest of manufacturing jobs leaving, steel plants, widget plants, aluminum casting plants, dye plants, smelter plants. And, you see towns just die on the vine, Fred. It's so sad.
Yep. And the answer isn't tariffs. It is diplomacy. It is having allies. It's having friends, teaching them at NDU. And you and I talked a little bit last week too, sir, about one of my concerns, and something we talk about a lot at VoteVets here, is that these changes, the stuff you were worried about happening at NDU and are coming down the pike, the things we're hearing about the Naval Academy, my God, he put Mike Flynn on the board of visitors for West Point, for God's sake. Charlie Kirk's on the advisory board for it's just unbelievable. But the problem I have, especially as serving as a retired military officer, and you as a diplomat, I'm sure, sir, is that you and I know that these changes aren't just going to be for the 3.5, 4 years we have left of Trump. The decisions you make for the military today have long range, long term implications, because these young officers and young enlisted men now are our future generals and sergeant majors later, aren't they? And so when you dismantle the key pieces of those education systems and training systems now, we pay the price for a generation, don't we?
Yeah, we do, and it's a smart way to look at it. The short term and the long term investments that we make as Americans and as taxpayers. Look, I'm tight with a dollar. I had to work my way, through
Well,
college.
you're Midwestern, sir. We know.
My wife is always saying to me, why you wrapping up that half-eaten cheeseburger, Tim? I'm taking it home and eating it later, man. I'm not wasting anything. That's the way I was raised by my mom and dad. And so there's short and long-term costs here, and trying to make sure that we're investing both in the short and the medium and the long term in educating, keeping up to speed our military people so that ideally they can preserve the peace, that they can create partnerships and relationships around the world, that we can make sure China and Russia and North Korea and Iran don't form an axis as they're doing now,
Right.
with North Korean troops fighting in Ukraine for the Russians
And Chinese now.
and Chinese troops now dying there, that we have to be able to create those same kind of coalitions in the world. You don't always do that through strength, but strength is a key part of that. Lethality is a key part of that. Great weapon systems, reforming the way we procure our weapon systems so that they're less expensive and better on the battlefield, and they're not designated for congressional districts, but for the national defense. We need to talk about reforming the Pentagon and reforming, getting our military ready for war, but also to preserve the peace. And investing in education is one of the best ways to do that. Quick story, Fred. I was on the Intelligence Committee. I was in Indonesia, outside Jakarta, 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm sitting in a Jeep with a lieutenant colonel or a colonel in their anti-terrorism force. And we're sipping on coffee. They're getting ready to go on a raid at 3 o'clock in the morning to get some bad guys. I turn to the guy and I say, hey, you've got 20 guys in the field. You're sitting here in this Jeep. Your life is at risk. Why are you doing that for us? Why do you risk your own life, your family, you go home to tonight, hopefully? And he looks at me, Fred, and he goes, you know what, Tim? I do it because I've been in your country. I was educated in your country. I went home on holidays with my roommate to meet his parents. I ate Thanksgiving and Christmas in your homes. I like your people. I know America at its heart, and they are good and decent people and hopeful people. I will be on your side in these kinds of things and risk my life. And those are the kind of people that come to National Defense University as colonels and They work in counterterrorism back home in their countries. They may be Secretary of Defense in their country someday. We want to have a chance to dialogue, sit in a Jeep with them at 3 o'clock in the morning over coffee and talk to them about why we want to go get certain bad guys and terrorists in certain situations.
Yep. And the work we do now, the partnerships we do now, the training we do together now is less wars later. Because in the end, as much as they talk about lethality, the real goal is never have to use it, because the enemy gets a push, right? And the enemy does shoot back, and we will lose our sons and daughters that we've entrusted to the government, entrust their safety to the government, and trust their good sense to the government. And I can see why you decided to leave and walk away at this moment when the question you have strong questions about that leadership and where they're going, don't you?
I do, Fred, and really, really tough decision for me to make. I'm a fighter. I wanted to stay engaged, help National Defense University win their battles, their budget battles, and their priority battles. I'm an American before I'm a Democrat. I did not want to do this, but the leadership from the Secretary of Defense to the nominated and now pending Joint Chiefs of Staff to their budget decisions, to the travesty happening in Ukraine, to the leaking of our most sensitive military information the day before we go after the Houthis. They're clowning around with emojis on a non secure system. It saddens me that I would have to take this step and get off a board that I truly love serving on. But I think that that was my best way to voice my frustration and my concern and my deep, deep disappointment in what this administration is doing on our national security.
Well, sir, it's a great place to wrap up. Well, we appreciate that. And again, it's I can tell people who know you. I was looking at your bio. You're not a guy who quits things. I really appreciate you coming on here to talk to our audience and the people who support vote vets and people who support our veterans and our allies and our military service members. To explain and kind of highlight the danger we face right now. That someone in your position, after many years of service to the nation in a number of roles, even beyond the military, tells us so much about the danger we face in the moment. So I hope we can get some attention with all this stuff, sir. So thanks so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Fred, an honor to be with you. Thank you for your great questions, your sincere interest in military issues and security issues. Keep on doing the great work of Vote Vets. And JJ, keep on trying to make me look good with the lighting.
KJ makes us all look good, sir. That's the only way. This would be complete tame wreck. Thank you, sir. It was great talking to you. Appreciate you. Have a great day, sir.
All right, Fred. Take care.
Cheers. Ah, what a great American. It's funny about the working in organizations like VoteVets is you get the chance to meet folks like that and have conversations with them and have these conversations. I was so excited when the ambassador reached out to me and through a colleague and I want you guys to hear. It's not our usual conversation, but the danger to the National Defense University is such, I feel like it's such a perfect example of what we face across the board for our military. When you hear about Mike Flynn being brought on the Board of Visitors, Charlie Kirk, the Board of Visitors at military academies, you have to question where this is going. When you see a story like at the beginning of the show, we're talking about books being banned at the Naval Academy, books being banned at our DoDEA schools. That's some very, very scary stuff. And when we talk about not educating our service members and their families, that means they're going to get educated somewhere, and it may not be what we want. And so it is very troubling. So we want to bring that and highlight that story to you. The National Defense University is a national treasure located in Fort McNair, right there outside of actually, it's in the district. The idea that it would come under fire as a play toy for these political fools, if you will, is scary. So I'm just so appreciative of Governor Roemer for joining us. JJ, did we get any questions in the chat? I've been so busy having a conversation. I kind of missed any. You guys want to ask a question real quick? We've got a couple more minutes before I have to call it a day. As you know, we're here every Friday. That's a great question. What is next? I agree. This idea that everything that has to do with the military is about lethality. That's not why people can't do that. Okay, you can't serve. There's a reason we take soldiers off the combat line and send them. They had a rest and recreation facility in the Middle East during the war. We could actually send our soldiers and our service members and our Marines and just take a break and lay around the pool for a few days. Lethality isn't always about killing everything or talking about all the time about killing things, right? The idea that the idea, just the very idea that giving our service members an extra day off during national holidays is somehow harming their service, or even worse so, the idea that maybe it's a ripoff that we're stealing from the government by getting a whole day off. We ask so much of those who step up to serve. My God, I'm ripping you away from your hometown. I'm putting you in places. Look, the Air Force has got Minot, for God's sakes. And I don't know if we've got anybody in the chat that's been to Minot, North Dakota, but my God, we're sending people to Minot, North Dakota and saying, hey, you can't have days off while you're here. Or even worse, send them to Hawaii and tell them they can't have days off. We can't function like that. Human beings need to take a break. I am a more lethal service member and soldier if I'm rested, if I'm capable, if my brain is at peace, if I'm strong with my family, if I'm strong with my faith, if I have faith. To give our service members, there's a reason we have chaplains, because our service members are whole ass human beings. And whole ass human beings need rest and relaxation. They need family time. They need a break from their duties. And the idea that they actually wrote a regulation to strip our service members, our airmen, the right to even just have an extra day off is so ridiculous. So yeah, I do agree. I knew we'd have one Minot person. There's always one that every time I've ever given a speech anywhere, I always see one Minot person, and they'll defend it. I don't know why. Thanks, Rochelle. But to tell the truth, though, so what's next? I think I am very concerned. I'm concerned that we're going to see. Look, there's a saying, and you guys are sick of hearing it, right? If you watch the show every week, and by the way, so many who join us every week, thank you. We're always here every 1 o'clock Eastern every Friday now, right here live. But the one thing we say in the military quite a bit, and I served for 22 years in the Army, and I did West Point before that, is we recruit the service member, we retain the family. Okay. The reason we have a service, these senior officers, these generals, these admirals, these sergeant majors, these senior master chiefs, all those folks, the reason they exist and they serve 22, 30, 40 years in the service is because they have families backing them up, and the families are sacrificing. Hence, kids protesting at Dodea schools because they're being asked so much to sacrifice. How long can we maintain a military and lead it with competent, capable people if we're telling them, hey, your kids can't read Maya Angelou's biography? Okay? Or we telling them that they can't get days off, extra days off during holidays because doesn't make them lethal. Okay? We're going to lose families. When we start losing families, you can't recruit them back in, folks. I recruit 18 and 19-year-olds, okay? I don't recruit 40-year-old majors or lieutenant colonels or lieutenant commanders. We need to build them and grow them. And they're not going to be there if we do 5-10 years when we're essentially at peace of telling people, well, your only job is to be lethal. It's not human. So I do worry. I agree with you. You had a question you put up, JJ? What do we do such action in order America to get? Oh man, what a great question and a hard one for me to answer. I wish I had I wish I could go 1, 2, 3. Number one, step up. Use your voice. You saw the hands-off protests. The protests are working. Our voices are working. There's a reason that Donald Trump stepped down off the tariffs. There's a reason they're getting away from their worst things. They are aware that we're watching them. They want to operate in secrecy and silence. They want you to be scared. And so if we show them that we're not scared, be it calling their offices, calling our elected officials' offices, protesting in public peacefully, protest peacefully. Protesting using your First Amendment right to free speech, those are the ways we can push back. I know it doesn't seem like it works, but when you bring in your voice and then a million others like we did, several million others like we did on April 5th, it can work. And so I do believe very much that the biggest thing is to step up, hold them accountable. There's town halls occurring. We're going to have a town hall here where I live in Missouri on April 25th. There's town halls occurring. Make them pay and make them understand that you're not putting up with this. You're not going to allow them to take away our rights and our freedom and our democracy without being held accountable for it. And being held accountable for it means paying at the ballot box and making them uncomfortable in public, having to hear your voice. So I feel very strongly that if you step up and use your voice in a peaceful manner in regards to your First Amendment rights, they will listen. And there's more to come on that. And there's really some interesting opportunities to come up to use your voice, especially for veterans. So stay tuned. Any other questions? It's a great question. Will our military be in the same morale as it was after Vietnam? I do worry. I'm telling you very bluntly, I am hearing horror stories, you guys. I'm hearing shocking horror stories from my friends who are currently serving. They're exhausted already. It's only been 3 months. They're exhausted already. They're exhausted with all the constant change and the bad policy that's coming down the pike. They're exhausted from constantly having to do taskings at the last minute. They're already exhausted with the idea of deploying 30,000 troops to the border for no good reason, cruising around in the desert to just waste time. They're exhausted with the idea of flying their beautiful C-17 aircraft meant to carry cargo and troops into combat, but instead they're using our beautiful American-built aircraft to fly people to a El Salvadoran torture camp. It's not what they signed up for. So I do worry that after the Trump administration, the morale and the camaraderie and the makeup of our military will be changed in ways that will take a decade or 2 decades to overcome. I wish I had good news for you on that. I don't, which is hence why I'm calling on you to step up and have your voices heard. But there is very, very big danger. The reason we're having these shows is to tell you there is grave, grave danger to the national security of the United States of America because of the bad, failed leadership by Trump and Pete Hegseth and his minions. They talk a good game about one lethality, but what they're doing is causing constant stress and constant pain for our military and their family members. And again, when the family members are tired of this crap, the military member is going to leave. And then where we stand. So yeah, it's a great question. Any other questions? Okay, I won't keep you any longer. I really appreciate. That's a great question, James. The VSOs. Well, I'm hearing. I can't neither confirm nor deny something, but I have heard from views. Look, if you want to hear open ones, you've seen Paralyzed Veterans of America stepped up very loudly. If you follow PVA is very concerned about. PVA especially has a very unique constituency of paralyzed veterans, and they're very concerned about the cuts to VA, the cuts to programs. You're starting to see grumbling in the homeless veterans communities. The big VFW and American Legion. I know, speaking to people who are over there, that they're seeing, and their alarm bells are going off from their membership, that the cuts to VA are very real and very serious. I believe their voices will be heard sooner rather than later. So I do believe the VSOs are stepping up. In unison's never easy, James. I'm not going to lie to you. I'd love to say they're going to do it together. I did that. I worked with those folks for a decade before I did this job, and others. But I do know from my sources that the VSOs are hearing loud and clear what's coming. And while they're trying to maintain a relationship with the VA and with the administration, they're having a very hard time doing that right now because the cuts that are being made are so wildly inappropriate and wildly misguided that at some point it's going to flip a switch and they're going to find themselves in direct opposition to this administration, which hasn't happened in a long time. But I do have some hope that our friends at the VSOs are stepping up. That's enough. I'm going to get going. I'm going to get some lunch. Man, I appreciate you guys being here. As we said, we settled on this time, 1 p.m. Eastern, which is 10 a.m. Pacific. It's noon in Missouri. It's 11 in mountains, whatever. This is the place every Friday right here at the VoteVets channels, right here at our YouTube channel. We're driving people to our YouTube channel right now. We really want to get a lot more people there. So we've got a big drive going on right now. So if you're here, I'd really appreciate you. If you're on LinkedIn, if you're on Twitter, if you're on whatever you're on, do me Facebook, do me a giant favor and surf over to VoteVets channel on YouTube and click that subscribe button. It's totally free. You'll see these videos and they come up, but it helps us reach more people and get into the algorithm. And I'm not going to get into the depths of it, but please do us a favor. Go over and subscribe to our YouTube channel and all of our social media channels. They're so easy to find. It's all at VoteVets. You can't beat it. If you want to know more about the organization and what we do, that's votevets.org. Really easy, votevets.org, all one voice. Go to votevets.org. You can find out what we do. There's 2 big buttons there. There's the donate button. That's how we pay for all this. Then the other one is the take action button. You can join us. You can be a part of the conversation. There it is. There's the take action button. Just click on that button. You'll get on our email list. You'll participate in our events we've got coming up and others. So those are the two cool places to go. Donate, take action. I really appreciate you guys being here for your lunch. Most of you on lunch. Thank you so many of the familiar names and faces that join us. I really do appreciate you being here. I agree. The audience does need to be larger. If it makes you feel better, we're almost 4,000 people across all of our channels right now. Kat, so thank you. But the key to that is going to be you guys. You guys are going to go ahead and reach out and tell your friends to join us and spread the word. Hit that share button while you're watching the show. Show your friends what you're watching. Get them involved. But most importantly, subscribe to our channel so you get notified when we're doing this. Sound good? If that's good for you, it's great for me. Stay in the fight. Keep up the fight. We are still got a lot of work ahead of us, and there's more to do, but it's all of us together that'll make it happen. I am Fred Wellman, host of Online with VoteVets. Thanks for being part of our community. We will see you here soon.